Diary of a Preacher. Woo! I thought I was going to get some more names for that. Come on. So not Diary of a CEO, Diary of a Preacher. And we're going to have, our two pastors on the stage, as well as Pastor Toby. So I'm just going to call them up one by one. So first of all, I want to call up this special person. He's my husband of 9 years. He's the father to our 8-year-old and 4-year-old girls. Come on, let's celebrate him. The one and only Pastor Toby Ashimolowo. Come on, let's celebrate him, let's celebrate him. And we're gonna bring onto the stage our brother who blessed us yesterday. Who was blessed yesterday? Come on. Come on, come on. Our very own, our brother, Pastor Gabriel Modesto. Come on, let's make some noise for him. And last but not least, our brother, oh my gosh, 2019, he was here on this very stage when we had our very first Royals Conference. So to have him here again in 2024 is just crazy. Please welcome to the stage, Pastor Vlad Savchuk. Ooh, let's celebrate Pastor Vlad. Yes. Thank you so much, Pastor Vlad. Thank you so much, Pastor Gabriel. Thank you for being with us today. So just a couple of things before we get started. So we will have a Slido code where you can submit any anonymous questions that you want. I believe they're going to put that on the screen shortly. If it's not there already, no? Okay. So it'll be on the screen shortly. You scan the QR code. You can submit some questions. Also, you can like questions, and the most liked question will go to the top of the list. I think they're working, I'm sure media is working on it, so that's fine. So this is called Diary of a Preacher. Let's make some noise. Okay. Oh, PT's waiting for a seat. Oh, please. Okay, can I have this, please? Okay. So I think we're going to start, first of all, just to hear a bit about your story, like Pastor Vlad, how you came into ministry and how you became a pastor. So just a little bit of background in terms of like your journey into ministry.
First, very glad to be here. Yes. Thank you for the opportunity. And for the last minute as well. Very last minute. I thought Toby was inviting me for 2027. He's like, no, it's just going to be in 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, but I'm very glad to be here. So I come from 4 generations of people that not only follow Jesus, but my great-grandfather actually sat in jail for 5 years for the cause of Christ, and then he was mercilessly beaten. He died from brain damage shortly after that. So I would say my story doesn't begin with me. It starts with people who came before me. And that's why I think a lot of us, where we feel the pull for ministry, is really God answering your grandma's prayer. That's why Moses' story doesn't start with Moses' faith. It says Moses' mother, the faith of his mother. And so I would say that was the case. At 13, I moved to the United States. My uncle starts the church when I was 13 and a half. And my uncle's strategy was, instead of building a large church, he wanted to build young leaders who will learn English, because we didn't speak English. So he made me to preach at 13. So I preached from 13 to 16. At 16, I became a youth pastor. Now, was I ready for that? Absolutely not. At 16, I was a youth pastor, and so I didn't feel the call of God until I was 16. But I already was doing the call of God before I heard the call of God. Why? Because my uncle told me to do that. So my encouragement will always be to people is that career is something you choose, a calling is something that chooses you. And God, before God's calling chooses you, you got to find every opportunity, any opportunity where you can serve. And you will quickly discover that calling upon your life. A lot of people wait until the prophet comes and points to them and their calling becomes evident. You just have to serve in whatever capacity there's a need. Your pastor, your leader asks you to serve, and after that your calling, like I was involved in worship, I was involved in everything, and then they kicked me out of the worship team. They said that you can't sing. I was like, oh, all right, God didn't call me to lead worship. I guess Michael W. Smith is not going to be in my future calling. And that is pretty much how I end up in the ministry. First it was my pastor calling me, and then the Lord calling me. And then I grew in the youth ministry for about 14 years. And then when the youth ministry outgrew the church by 4 times, my pastor asked me to step down from the youth ministry, raise young people who were like 17 years of age, and then to take over the church. And so 7 years ago, that's when I did that.
Pastor Gabriel, I mean, we heard about your amazing story yesterday, but obviously for those of us, that weren't here in the building, where were you? I'm just kidding. But yeah, it would just be great to hear, your story and how you got into ministry as well.
I'm generated from a miracle of salvation that no one preached to my mother. She was a Satanist, and through prophetic spiritual dreams, God showed salvation to her. And at a desperate moment in deliverance, she was told to go to this church. She went. She was delivered from all the spirits she carried for her life. And with no ability to have children, one day going to the altar, suffering a lot of abuse from my dad, who was a mafia leader, very violent man, always under the influence of cocaine. And Brazil is very rough. It looks beautiful, but it's very rough. And in that moment, God said to her, "You're pregnant, and I want you to name this child Gabriel." So I was born into a promise. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because I hear a lot of people in this generation say, "I want to be this," or "I want to be that," without realizing the cost of understanding what it is to accept something that you didn't start. And I never started a ministry. I didn't want ministry. I didn't want to preach. But I have a mother who does not accept no. And she said, "I suffered too much for you to come." And so for a good 10 years of my life, I was following her. She was a missionary around the world for the Assemblies of God. And that's where I've learned a lot of my theology, a lot of my life journeys. And from there on, eventually I accepted what was already heavenly written. I don't think we understand God's sovereignty as we should. There are moments in life where God just won't take you for a no. And you can say no to him, but he says, "I don't feel like it. Because I invested too much in you to see my plan go to waste." And so he will force life circumstances to get you out of the place of ignorance into the place of revelation. And a lot of us say no because we don't have revelation. Once we understand the revelation of what he wants to do, we understand it's bigger than any choice we could ever make. So I didn't really choose. I just understood what he chose for me. And that's why I'm here.
Thank you guys for that introduction. Our first question for tonight is, when did you know that you were called to ministry, and how did you arise?
So I would say at 16 is when I received that call from the Lord. In the beginning, how that conspired is that because of my birth, one of my eye looks up, the other one looks down. I had 2 eye surgeries. I struggled with chronic insecurities. I was skipping school because I was embarrassed to stand in front of a group of students. So the idea of me preaching in front of people, I was like, "God, I got the wrong face." Plus my personality, I'm scared of people. And I'm like, that's just not for me. So I grew up in a very godly home. I'm the oldest of 5. So the way I channeled my pain, I knew drugs isn't the way. I wouldn't even know where to find drugs. I didn't know, smoking isn't the way. Taking my life isn't the way. I grew up in a very also holiness church where taking your life straight to hell. I'm going through hell. I don't want to be in more hell. So I did the math. I was like, this is just not going to be good. So what I did from 13, as I was already preaching under the instruction of my uncle, I started to lock myself after school, Monday through Friday, for about 25 to 30 minutes every day, because I battled with very heavy insecurity. And on top of that, because my optical nerve was damaged, my mom told me, I had great migraine headaches. So I would pop 5, 6 Advils during the summer only to numb it. It didn't go away. So I locked myself to honestly vomit, complain to God, why did you do this? Why did you allow me to be born like this? Why is my life like this? And then in my desperation, I prayed this prayer. I said, God, if you heal me and you take away these insecurities, you can have me. Now, I didn't mean it. I was desperate. And I was a teenager. You don't take these things seriously. Well, God did. So the headaches are gone. God heals me supernaturally. No surgery, no medical intervention. And my insecurities slowly, within the 2 years of me spending time in the presence of God, I still have the same body, I still have the same skin stretched over a skeleton, but something inside of me just changed. I stopped caring what people think about me. Because when you lose yourself in the presence of God, you honestly just lose yourself. So my last year in high school, I come to church, and now I had a different plan. I'm like, well, finally I feel good about myself. I'm gonna be a businessman. And I'm gonna give to church 20% like Mormons do, you know, instead of 10%, because all the regulars do 10%, I'll do 20 because I'm so grateful to God. I come to church and every Sunday I hear this thing, I will give you my life, you can have me. And I was like, God, you know what I meant. I meant I will not do drugs. God's like, no, 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 no. The battle got so intense that I took every Wednesday off fasting from school. So I didn't go to school. I locked myself in the room, and for 6 hours I spent time in prayer. At the time, listening to Juanita Bynum song, and during that song, "Show Me Your Glory," Jesus came into the room. Now it wasn't physical, but I felt it so real. I was lying on the floor, and this is my prayer, Pastor Toby. I said, Lord, what would you want me to do? I knew what God wanted me to do. I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to be poor. I did. The way I grew up, church keeps you poor so God can keep you humble. And I was like, God, I'll do anything, just not ministry. Plus they always get criticized, and my uncle being my boss, not gonna be a good idea. My parents warned me, that's not gonna be a good idea. So I was like, God, just anything but this. Jesus came into the room and I really felt He did not ask me for my opinion. This is what I felt. He came, I'm lying on the floor, and He went, He marked me. All my debates were over. All my questions were over. My fears were over. From that point on, I was willing to die. Not only live poor, to die where He would send me to die as my great-grandfather. I woke up from that place and I was determined, that's it, for the rest of my life, whether I'm successful, not successful, that's a secondary, third thing. My life, because it's otherwise would have been ended in hell. I mean, it was so bad during my teenage years that my prayer was, God, kill me, because a world will be a better place with me not in it. That's what I really was convinced in here. So the fact that God could now use my life to make me poor, make me miserable, have people beat me, I was like, well, I wanted to die anyway. He can do whatever He wants to do. And I feel like after that point, I really feel like I became unstoppable, because when you're dead, it's very, very hard to stop you.
Let's appreciate Pastor Vlad.
I just want to point out that we have the slide on the screen now, so you can scan the QR code on there, and obviously, like I said, you can submit your questions and like questions as well. Yeah.
Yeah, same question to you, Pastor Gabriel.
Because my mother's a missionary, I saw a very rough side of ministry. There was no hotels, there was no planes. There wasn't the glamorous that people think ministry comes with. And I saw a side of ministry that's very politically rough and very rejectful sometimes of the gospel, even within the church. And so I grew up watching that, and I said to myself, well, I don't want this. And even more, I don't want to be a minister and live in a council flat in Southeast London for the rest of my life. And so I took some skills that I had, and I started to play football, and I got quite far with football. Fast forward, I was about 16, 17, and I already started to preach for the youth slowly, but I still didn't want it. And my mother had a stroke, and she was in hospital. And while that was happening, I was in Panama with a lot of things happening for me that I believed would take me and my mother out of the situation we grew up in. And I had an encounter with God one particular night, and I was in my room sitting down in the bed, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And I heard the door open. I thought, it can't be my mother. She has a stroke. She's in bed in the hospital. And this man walked in. I couldn't see his face, and this was my experience. And he said to me, I didn't create you for this. I created you to be an instrument in my hands, to be a messenger of my voice. You can fill stadiums and play football, or you can fill stadiums and win souls. And that struck my inner spirit in such a way that it was a conviction. Such a conviction that I didn't have to think about it. I said, this is it. This is who I am, and I accepted who I was and never looked back.
Thank you so much, Pastor Gabriel. One of the questions that we wanted to ask was, what are some ways that we as young people can arise in our spiritual gifts so that our life doesn't remain dormant?
When Samuel anointed Saul, he said, when these signs will be fulfilled, do what the occasion demands. A lot of us have received more impartation than we have opportunities or we are doing with. For example, most of our problem isn't the fact that we didn't receive. It's that we don't release what we received. People keep going, pray for me. I need to have new impartation. My question is, what did you do with the previous one? So Paul tells Timothy, he said, do not allow the spirit of fear, timidity, to hold you back. He said, fan into flame the gift that is inside of you. So what I think the problem with many of us is we are gifted, anointed. We have a lot of that, and it's just not activated because it's activated through our action. Now, the reason why we're not activated through our action, few reasons. One of them is insecurity. Insecurity, in other words, we think too much about ourselves and too little about people that this gift was designed for. So the moment you just take your eyes off of yourself, like for example, for me what I had to do is this, is I have to forget myself. The moment I become conscious and I look in the mirror, I say, man, they're going to be looking at that. They're going to be listening to my voice. Like, I mispronounce words. English is like my third language. The moment I get conscious, I will never allow God to use me because me stands in the way between my gift and the people this gift is designed to impact. The second thing that will hold us back from acting in the capacity that is available for us, and that is this: poor character. And this is the thing. We have heard we need to get holy. God cannot use if we're not holy. That's not 100% true. How many preachers and pastors you know who were used by God and were not holy? A lot. Do you know why? Because God doesn't use you because you're holy. He uses you because of your identity. So it's a dangerous thing because you can ignore your righteousness and continuously to be used by God, and Jesus can say at the end to you, you cast out demons, healed the sick, and did all of that. He says, I didn't even know you, because you learned how to operate by the power of His name, lacking intimacy and integrity. But most of us, our problem is the other one. We use a smallest condemnation and guilt that the enemy will bring to jeopardize our gift and to tell us, you can't allow God to use you now. Why? Because you were tempted. Why? Because you had an argument. Why? Because you're not perfect. Why? Because you missed a Bible reading last week. So the enemy will use our imperfections, and all of us have them, to say you should wait until you rise to a deeper level and only then have greater faith. Why is the first healing mentioned in the Old Testament was done by a guy named Abraham who was caught lying about his wife, and God comes to Abimelech and says, hey, by the way, you're a dead man because you took the wife of my prophet. Excuse me? Abraham is not a prophet. He's a lying guy. And God tells Abimelech, He says, the only way your wives will get healed is if he prays for them. Imagine you just got caught with lack of faith, I'm not advocating sin. I'm not advocating unrighteousness. What I'm advocating is this. Too many of us have laid the gifts and the callings lay dormant because we say, I'm not there spiritually what I should be. Abimelech comes to Abraham, say, Abraham, bro, why did you do it? Abraham's like, man, just lack of faith. And then Abimelech says, I want you to pray for these wives. Think about this. Abraham is believing for his wife to be healed. Abraham has never seen a healing in his life. His own wife is sick, barren. And the Lord is putting him on the spot. How do you minister? People say, you can't give what you don't have. How can you pray for healing for the women who are barren when your wife is barren? We don't give what we have. We give what Christ has. We don't minister out of our feelings. We don't minister out of, well, I don't feel anointed right now. It's not how you feel. You are anointed. And if you step out of your feelings and you step out of, well, God didn't solve everything in my life. Well, it's not about you. When you are not feeling the anointing, minister out of obedience. Step out of faith. You will see the gifts will grow with use. Your confidence will grow with use. It will not grow if another pastor prays for another impartation. You get zapped with power. You're shaking for 3 days. You're like, yeah, now I'm ready. No. You overcome intimidation, overcome your own self problems, step out. With that said, after a while, you can be so comfortable being used by God that you can ignore your character. God will still use you. But He won't be intimate with you. And you can get to the point, if you ignore the fruit of the Spirit and only operate in the gifts of the Spirit, you will destroy your life, your family, end up as an embarrassment and a scandal, though you were still used by God. Because God using somebody is not God's confirmation that He approves their lifestyle. Sorry, that was mouthful.
Did I add to that?
I'll add one more thing, is that we have been taught to believe that this is ministry. When I have a microphone, when I have followers on Instagram, when people know me, that means that I'm anointed. So I should expose more of my gift. But actually in Acts chapter 6 and 7, it was young men who served bread to widows, and Stephen being one of them, who began to perform miracles and wonders through serving widows in the church. And so I believe that the biggest miracle God wants to perform is with people who are cleaning the church, bringing water to the preacher, cooking in the kitchen while we're here. And we have been taught as a generation that I can only activate my gift once people are seeing what I'm doing. But God is the one that activates you. And so you need to be more interested in what the kingdom wants to see than what people are seeing. And how powerful would it be if before a preacher in this conference picked up a microphone, while you walked through the doors, the ushers were so anointed that you would felt the presence of the Holy Spirit before you even took a seat where you are right now. And that would be a church that I believe Jesus imagined. So stop waiting for people to watch you. Stop waiting for people to follow you. Go out to the streets. Salvation could be at the bus stop. Salvation could be in the hospital bed. Salvation can be at university doorways and hallways. Salvation is where you are saying, God, send me. I'm willing. I will go. So we need to deconstruct this idea that I can only fully invest in what God has for my life if someone invites me or if someone puts me in a platform. You are the platform. You are the kingdom. You are the church. And I'm going to love to see when the Antichrist closes down the building's doors, how we're going to behave as a church. I would love it. Because there won't be no instruments. There will be no piano in the background. There will be no hypes. And so you will have to be the real thing. And the apostles were real things. And that's why even though they were being stoned, like Stephen, for doing nothing, he was stoned for serving charity and for preaching the Holy Spirit. But even while being stoned, he looks up to heaven and says, I see Jesus sat at the right hand of God. Forgive them, for they do not know what they do. That's the generation that I believe God is calling and activating their gifts.
Our time is up, but I got one more question. It's clearly evident that both of you are full of the Holy Spirit, full of His fire. So the next question is, what does your consecration life look like? How do you constantly stay consecrated to God?
I do believe every person has a secret, and you either live in a secret place or you live in a secret sin, but you can't live in both. And our secrets, they either make us sick and create a scandal down the road, or our secrets bring supernatural in our life. In Matthew 6, Jesus told us to do 3 things in secret. He says, in secret give, in secret pray, and in secret fast. If you remember, we have 3 main enemies according to Apostle John. We have greed, we have pride, and we have lust that fights against us. If you look at the secrets Jesus told us to have, and that is this: prayer defeats pride. Because the real reason people don't pray is not because they're busy. It's because they're proud. Prayerlessness is just one of the fruits of pride. Giving defeats greed. And something happens when you begin to fast. It subdues your appetites. So for me personally, these 3 things are the threefold cord. When it's combined together, I become uneasily broken. I'm not confident in my ability to overcome Satan. I'm not confident in my ability to stay pure. But I'm confident in His ability to keep me pure, keep me strong, if I abide according to godly disciplines that the Lord outlines in His Word. And for me, those is prayer, fasting, and giving.
I would just add that my father was murdered, so I grew up without a father, and I made God my father. And I was quite shocked when traveling around and doing ministry to see how many rituals people do to come and speak to a father. And I thought to myself, is this what family looks like? Do you do these rituals to come and speak to your father, to your mother? And so one of the ways that I maintain the humbleness within consecration in my life as well is a relationship of a father. He is my father. And there are days that He's going to tell me off. There are days that He's going to be silent because He wants me to understand what I need to understand. He's already spoken. There are days that He's going to bring pressure because I need to move. But there are days where He will love me. He will say, this is a season, but I'm with you. And in those seasons comes the prayer, the fasting, and all these things that we add on. But I think some of us need to learn that consecration also looks like relationship and not just rituals. You can speak in tongues and not be consecrated. You can shout in your room and nothing's happening. But if you break at the Father's feet, if you say, Jesus, this is what you chose and you know what it is. You knew what I was. Help me, show me. And that relationship will build that for you.
Make some noise for Pastor Gabriel.
Come on, let's be on our feet. Let's celebrate them.